Who would have believed that one of the greatest and most powerful kings in history was really a walking pile of rotting flesh, exploding on his death with gas, having suffered an abscess that oozed horrific pus throughout his entire adult life, and smelling at all times like he had been dead for days? Henry VIII, yes, the one with 6 wives, a god complex, and founder of that thing known as the Church of England. The textbooks fail to mention that he not only became a monstrous tyrant, but that his body was literally rotting away alive as he ruled. Brutal enough for you, Game of Thrones fans? The actual end of King Henry VIII in real life was even more disgusting, sadder, and more terrifying than any historical novel could convey. This is the tale of the king who rotted alive. We think of crowns and thrones, majestic portraits, and a tyrant with an unstoppable appetite and an ego to match. But over the course of 38 short years, we are given numerous other examples. What if I told you the story thou hast learned is only half the truth? This is more than a king's tale. It is a tale of what happens when unchecked power, illness, love, and paranoia turn a man into something so much less than human. Henry VIII wasn't just ill. His body turned into a horrible, grotesque mix. His life became a psychodrama of filth, rotting flesh, betrayal, and fear. This is the true story of the bizarre case of the king who rotted alive. The Golden Prince Henry was not always a monster. When he became king in 1509, he was still quite young, only 24 years of age, and athletic, supposedly one of the most handsome men in the whole of Europe. He was bright, pleasant, spoke many tongues, danced, jousted, and wrote poetry and love letters. The very ideal Renaissance king. Beneath his charming demeanor, however, was a man intensely focused on influence, legacy, and authority. This ambition would gradually affect every aspect of his life and take a devastating toll on his well-being. The decline begins, a notable event. The decline began in 1536, during a jousting tournament, when Henry fell from his horse and lost consciousness for 2 hours. In an era without modern medical care, this head injury went untreated. Historians now believe this incident altered his personality, leading to increased irritability, impulsiveness, and paranoia. The once promising ruler became harsher, and his previously strong health began to deteriorate. This was the beginning of a disturbing transformation. The stubborn leg ulcers. Soon after the accident, Henry developed chronic leg ulcers. These weren't small sores. They were large, inflamed, and permanently open wounds that never healed. They oozed foul-smelling pus, making it nearly impossible for anyone to be near him. The stench was so strong that attendants carried scented cloths just to tolerate his presence. Some accounts say the smell could be detected from several rooms away. Servants drew lots to decide who would tend to him, as no one wanted to risk infection. No one dared speak of it. Such talk could be considered treason. His doctors, terrified of punishment, pretended he was in good health. Even as the ulcers deepened, the infections worsened, and his body began breaking down from the legs upward. A gluttony fit for a monster. Despite his medical trauma, Henry overate as if trying to fill a bottomless pit. He consumed up to 5,000 calories a day. Whole, roasted pigs, dozens of chickens, mountains of meat pies, sugar-drenched pastries, gallons of ale and red wine. The royal kitchens prepared over 800 dishes a day for the household. Henry believed certain foods had magical properties: swans for grace, venison to improve hunting, oysters for romance. Yet he kept gaining weight. By the end of his life, he weighed around 400 pounds, with a 54-inch waist, larger than the average medieval man's height. He required a custom-built mechanical hoist just to get out, a palace built on paranoia. As his body rotted, his mind crumbled. Henry became convinced that everyone was plotting to kill him. He installed peepholes in palace walls and built hidden escape passages. He slept with knives and pistols under his pillow, and armed guards surrounded him at night. His vast spy network even spied on the spies themselves. At court, one careless phrase or suspicious glance could mean execution. Henry sometimes had enemies killed based solely on nightmares he claimed to have had about them. Wives, torture, and terror. Henry had 6 wives, but history often forgets the psychological torture he inflicted on them. Anne Boleyn, moments before her execution, forced to watch 5 men, among them her own brother, die on false charges. Catherine Howard, executed under a decree that made it treason to marry the king without revealing past sexual history. Catherine of Aragon, separated from her daughter, imprisoned, and possibly poisoned. Jane Seymour died from childbirth complications. Henry began planning his next marriage within 9 days. Anne Cleves survived but had to hide her release at annulment for fear of execution. These were not love stories. They were psychological thrillers with bloody endings. Death begins before the grave. In his final months, Henry could hardly move. He needed specially made wheelchairs, ramps, and several men to carry him. His body was like a decaying carcass, pieces of flesh falling away as he was moved. Servants followed behind with cloths to wipe away the trail of pus and rot. The ulcers had eaten deep into the bone. The exploding coffin. Henry VIII died on January 28, 1547, likely from kidney failure, infection, and organ failure. But even death didn't end the horror. His body was wrapped in lead and cloth to slow decomposition. It didn't work. During the funeral procession, the court swelled with gas. At Sion Abbey, the coffin literally exploded, spraying decomposing fluid onto the floor. Dogs were reportedly seen licking the remains. One chronicler noted that they tasted of the king. The grave itself was hard to dig. His massive coffin kept collapsing the earth. Even his burial was an undignified struggle. The ghost that wouldn't leave. For years after his burial, strange noises, foul smells and whispers were reported near his tomb. Some claimed it was his ghost. Historians believe the truth was simpler. His death brought relief, not grief. The nightmare was finally over. A legacy of horror and power. Henry VIII founded the Church of England and reshaped the monarchy in his own image. But his legacy was also one of fear, cruelty, and decay. He ruled through terror, and even in his final years, when he was visibly decomposing, no one dared challenge him. Those present at his death were there not out of loyalty, but to survive his rage and his stench until the end. History's grotesque warning. The next time you see a portrait of Henry VIII, broad shoulders, proud stance, piercing eyes, the real Henry wasn't just a tyrant. He was a man who rotted alive, physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally. This is a cautionary tale of what happens when absolute power is paired with unchecked ego, trauma, and paranoia. If you found this story revealing, subscribe, and remember, never think of a king's tomb the same way again.